Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. And this time I wish to talk about mindfulness and mindlessness in the same breath. And maybe even trying to understand that conditioned mindfulness and mindlessness may actually be the same thing. And I know mindfulness and mindlessness sounds contradictory, sounds paradoxical. But maybe the minute difference would be to observe, to become an observer of the self, of our own patterns in a more aware way, wherein we can reflect on our responses, we can reflect on our own patterns, on our own habituated beings as an observer to the observant that is happening all over here. So let us consider an example over here wherein we can actually say that being mindful but not being aware and being mindless may actually be the same thing. And it so happened that on one of the very rare instances wherein I actually peel peas, I had taken somebody's help and we were peeling peas. And it so happened that a few of the pods had few worms in them. And invariably, both of us, not at the same time, but had happened to say that the peas are bad, that the peas are rotten. And it was only when I reflected back, it was only when I stepped back, when I took a breather, and I observed my own thought process, and I realized that that thought process was a conditioned mind, wherein I had said that the peas are bad because it had worms on it. But when I reflected on that thought, I realized that maybe those very peas were the finest of the peas. Those were the very peas that were really good, and that's why they had another life form breeding on it. It may not necessarily be a human life that could benefit from those peas, but yes, it was a life in a different form, in a different format that was breeding, that was thriving, that was surviving on it. But it was only in the hindsight, when I took a step back, when I took a breather back, I was able to understand that maybe the pea had a bigger purpose, or the pod of pea had a bigger purpose than just serving a human life, or two human life, or five human lives. Maybe the purpose of the pea was to serve life in whatever format it might have been, in whatever form of expression it might have been in. But my understanding that the P was bad was only from a human construct, was only from a human conditioning. And probably at times we truly need to step out from our own ways to be able to understand the bigger picture, to be able to understand that life works in a much bigger dimension, and most of our thoughts are conditioned thoughts. Most of what we called being mindful is our conditioned way of thinking. And maybe stepping away, stepping aside from our own conditioned thought processes may actually serve life and invariably serve us much better. So let's take an example of this cup, which is empty right now. And most would say, given the conditioned mindset, that a filled glass is better than an empty glass. How about also taking a step back? How about also stepping aside from that conditioning and be able to even understand that as beautiful and as useful as a filled cup is to all of us, because it may quench our thirst, it may quench the desire to drink a certain drink. But at the same time, an empty vessel is also useful. So, why not also understand and why not also think that as beautiful and as purposeful is a filled cup? Its purpose also serves when it's empty, because only when it's empty can something be filled in it. How about also understanding that as beautiful as a written book is, At times, it's also beautiful to have a blank page, because it's only when the page is blank that something can be written on it. But let's not dismiss the fact also that whatever has been written can also be edited, can also be rewritten, can also be recreated. So maybe in some ways, a conditioned mindfulness may equal mindlessness as well, because it doesn't help us understand our own patterns. It doesn't help us be reflective about our own selves. And as Albert Einstein had said, that we cannot solve the same problem with the same kind of thinking that we had used when we had created those problems. So maybe being aware of what is filled in our mind is more important than mere mindfulness. Because in my perspective, a conditioned mindfulness is equal to mindlessness, which truly doesn't serve a bigger purpose, which truly doesn't help us develop a bigger perspective. So let's try and think about that a little. Let's try and inquire how much of ourselves are conditioned, how much of our life is conditioned, because if we are conditioned, our life is conditioned. And maybe even realize that that conditioning helps to a certain point in time, to a finite degree. But maybe in the infinity of life, it is important to keep editing, to keep rewriting, to keep recreating the awareness of our own minds. Let's try and work on that, and I will see you once again next week. Till then, stay tuned in.